You sat down one day, maybe it was a Sunday, maybe after a stressful week, and you made a plan, a real one. You wrote down your income, your expenses, you did the math, and on paper, it worked. There was money left over, enough to save something, maybe even something meaningful. And then life happened. Not a catastrophe, not some dramatic emergency, just life. A birthday dinner you couldn't skip. A bill that came in slightly higher than expected. A week where you were exhausted and you ordered food 3 times because you just didn't have anything left in you. And by the end of the month, the savings column was empty again. And now here you are, maybe feeling a little ashamed. Maybe telling yourself you just need more discipline, more willpower. That other people manage to save, so why can't you? I want to talk about that feeling today, because I think the reason saving feels impossible for so many people has almost nothing to do with discipline, and everything to do with something much deeper. Something that most personal finance content completely ignores. The way we talk about saving money in this culture is almost cruel when you think about it. The entire conversation is built on the assumption that you already have enough, and you're just choosing to spend it wrong. Cut your coffee. Stop eating out. Cancel your subscriptions. As if the reason people don't have savings is because they're frivolous. As if the math is simple and you just haven't done it yet. But here's what I've noticed. Most people who struggle to save aren't struggling because they don't know they should save. They know. They've read the articles. They've watched the videos. They've downloaded the budgeting apps. The information isn't the problem. The problem is something older than that. Something that lives in how your brain learned to relate to money long before you ever had a paycheck. Think about this for a second. If you grew up in a household where money was always tight, where you heard your parents argue about bills, or where there was this quiet, constant tension around finances, your nervous system learned something very early on. It learned that money disappears, that having it is temporary, that spending it now is safer than waiting, because waiting means it might be gone before you get the chance. That's not a character flaw. That's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. It was protecting you. And then fast forward to your adult life, and you sit down with a budget spreadsheet and wonder why it doesn't work. Why the logical part of your brain and the actual behavior don't match. It's because you're fighting decades of deeply encoded survival patterns with a Google sheet. That's an unfair fight. There's a concept in behavioral economics called present bias, and it basically describes what every human being experiences to some degree. We consistently value what's available to us right now over what's available in the future, even when the future option is objectively better. The classic example is, if I offer you $10 today or $15 in a week, most people take the 10, even though 15 is more, even though a week isn't even that long, because the brain assigns a kind of invisible discount to anything that's delayed. Now, apply that to saving money. You're being asked every single month to take a portion of your real, tangible, usable money, money that could solve a real problem right now, or at least make a difficult week feel slightly less difficult, and move it somewhere where it becomes abstract, untouchable, future. That is genuinely hard. And it's not a matter of intelligence. Economists, therapists, financial advisors, All of them struggle with present bias. It's not a personal failing. It's how human cognition works. But there's another layer to this that I think gets missed even more. Saving money requires a certain relationship with the future. You have to believe the future is worth preparing for. You have to feel, on some level, that there's going to be a future you in a stable enough place who will benefit from the sacrifice you're making today. And for a lot of people, especially people who are already stretched thin, that belief is shaky. If you're living with financial stress, if you're in a job that doesn't feel secure, if your life has a quality of unpredictability to it, your brain is not in planning mode. It's in survival mode. And in survival mode, the idea of putting money aside feels less like building security and more like gambling. There's also the exhaustion factor, and I don't think we talk about this enough. Financial discipline requires cognitive energy. Every time you decide not to spend money on the thing you want, on the convenience that would make your life easier, on the experience that everyone else seems to be having, you're making a decision. And decision-making is tiring. Genuinely, physiologically tiring. This is something researchers call decision fatigue. The more choices you have to make throughout a day, the worse you get at making them as the day goes on. And when someone is living under financial pressure, they're making difficult spending decisions constantly. Every trip to the grocery store is a series of tiny, stressful calculations. Every bill is a negotiation. Every social event involves weighing cost against connection. By the time you get to the moment where you should be transferring money to savings, your brain has nothing left. And so it takes the path of least resistance, which is usually not the savings account. None of this means you're hopeless. It means you've been trying to solve a psychological problem with a financial tool. And those two things don't speak the same language. Here's what changed things for me conceptually, and I think it might land for you too. Saving money isn't really about money. At the root of it, saving is an act of trusting your future self. It's saying, the person I'll be in 6 months, in 2 years, in a decade, that person deserves resources. That person's problems are worth preparing for. That person's life is worth protecting. And if you've spent most of your life in a reactive financial mode, solving the problem that's in front of you because that's all there was bandwidth for, then this kind of thinking doesn't come naturally, because you never really had the luxury of thinking that way. But when you start to see saving as self-respect rather than self-denial, something shifts. It stops being about willpower. It stops being about what you're giving up. And it starts being about who you're building toward. This also changes how you think about the amount. Because I think one of the sneakiest reasons saving feels impossible is that people set targets they can't meet. They read that they should save 20% of their income. And if they can't do 20%, they do nothing. Because something that isn't 20% doesn't feel like saving. It feels like failing. But that's not how compounding works, financially or psychologically. A habit of saving $40 a month is worth infinitely more than a plan to save $400 a month that never actually starts. The behavior matters more than the number. The consistency matters more than the amount. When you start small enough that it doesn't feel like sacrifice, you start to build something you've probably never had around money. Evidence. Evidence that you can do this. Evidence that you are the kind of person who saves. And that evidence, that quiet psychological shift, is worth more than any financial strategy I could give you. So what does this actually look like in practice? Not in theory, not in a spreadsheet, in real life with real pressures. The first thing is to make saving automatic before your brain gets involved. This is why automatic transfers exist. Not because they're a clever hack, but because they remove the decision entirely. If the money moves to a separate account the same day your paycheck arrives, you never have to use willpower. You never have to make the choice under conditions of exhaustion or temptation. It just happens. And you build your life around what's left. Start with an amount that genuinely doesn't hurt. Seriously, if $50 a month feels comfortable, start with $30. The goal right now is not the number. The goal is the identity. Proving to yourself that you are someone who saves. You can always increase it later, once the behavior is locked in. The second thing is to give your savings an emotional name. This sounds strange, but it matters more than you'd think. Emergency fund is abstract. Surgery fund. Never have to ask for help fund. 3 months where I can breathe fund. These are real. These are things your nervous system understands. When your savings has an emotional anchor, it stops being a number and starts being a purpose. And purpose is much harder to spend than an abstraction. The third thing, and this is the one people resist the most, is to stop calculating how long it'll take. Because when you're starting small, the math looks discouraging. $30 a month sounds like it'll never add up to anything real. But you're not just building a balance. You're building a reflex. You're rewiring what money means to you. And that process doesn't show up in a spreadsheet. There will be months where something comes up and you can't save. There will be months where you have to pull from what you've put aside. That's not failure. That's literally what the money is there for. The goal isn't a perfect saving streak. The goal is to keep returning to the behavior. Every time you come back to it after a hard month, you prove something to yourself. You prove that this is who you are now. I want to leave you with something that I think is actually reassuring, even though it doesn't sound like a solution at first. The fact that saving is hard for you is not evidence that you're bad with money. It's evidence that you're a person living in real conditions, with real pressures, real history, and a brain that is doing its best with the information it has. The systems around us aren't designed to make saving easy. The cost of living is genuinely difficult. Wages for most people have not kept pace with how expensive life has become. And layered on top of that are decades of psychological patterns, family dynamics, cultural pressures, and social comparison that shape every single financial decision you make, whether you're aware of it or not. You're not fighting a math problem. You're navigating a deeply human experience. And the people who figure out how to save money consistently, they didn't do it by becoming more disciplined. They did it by building systems that worked with their psychology instead of against it. They did it by starting smaller than felt meaningful. They did it by being patient with themselves during the months it didn't work. You don't have to have this figured out. You just have to keep coming back to it. That's all it takes. Not perfection, just return. If this helped you in any way, leave a like. It genuinely means a lot. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more of this, feel free to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.